Along the trails at Cherokee Park, it is not unusual to come across a sign that reads, "Trail closed, area resting." Just like farmers who let fields lie fallow to allow the soil to heal, when a trail gets too much use, the soil compacts, erosion sets in, and plants along the edges begin to wither. Resting the trail for a season allows the vegetation to regrow and the soil to heal. By stepping back from constant use, the ecosystem gets a chance to breathe again. That's not only true of trails, that is true of humans too. Like nature, we need seasons in our lives when we are not bent over by constant demands. The ancient Jewish practice of Sabbath is at the heart of our text today and is built in to creation itself. Do you remember during the pandemic and some of those early weeks of shutdown when truly no one was going anywhere? Remember the views that were visible from vistas in our country and others that are not visible when we're all going in motion, releasing carbon into the atmosphere? It didn't take long, actually only a matter of days, for creation to breathe. And when it let out a breath, something beautiful was visible that we just don't typically see. Now, this kind of rest may feel elusive for many of us. In an era where technology is always on as long as it's charged, and in an economy that demands constant production, disconnecting can be difficult to practice, except when some preachers turn sermons into hostage situations. Maybe then we practice disconnecting. In Europe and South America, several countries have actually passed laws called the right to disconnect. The laws say that employers cannot demand that their employees answer emails or phone calls when their workday is over. France was the first country, of course they were, the French know how to relax, to pass a right to disconnect law. And countries such as Spain and Belgium, Australia and Argentina have all passed similar laws. Though this legislation has been proposed in our country, no such law has been passed. And in our country, isn't one of the first questions we ask when we meet someone, "What do you do?" Sabbath invites creation and humankind into a sacred ritual of stopping. In Hebrew, the word Sabbath means to rest or to cease. And it is in the stopping that restoration becomes possible. We see this rhythm come to the synagogue in Luke's gospel when Jesus is teaching on the Sabbath. Luke tells us that Jesus was teaching in the synagogue on the Sabbath when a woman appeared who had been bent over for 18 years. Scholars believe this woman was in chronic pain, with some speculating that she had a disease that caused a fusion of the bones in her spine, creating a constant stiffness and acute pain that she carried with her every day for 18 years. 18 years of living with chronic pain. 18 years of living with shame in a culture that believed illness meant God's judgment upon your life. She lived through 18 years of her world becoming very small. Luke says Jesus noticed her. And that's where healing begins in the Gospels, with the one who sees the overlooked. Though women were not allowed inside the sanctuary of the synagogue at this time, Jesus calls her forward. Though rabbis didn't typically address women directly, Jesus says to her, "Woman, you are set free from your ailment." The NRSV says she stood up straight and began praising God. But the Greek goes even deeper and says, listen, immediately she was restored. After 18 years, this daughter of Abraham was restored to health and restored to her community. No more was she weighed down by shame. She was set free in the synagogue on Sabbath, for Sabbath is about restoration. Maybe that's why Jesus performed so many of his miracles on the Sabbath. Luke tells us that it was after Jesus healed the man with the withered hand on the Sabbath that the Pharisees and scribes began to discuss what they might do with Jesus. In a similar way, after Jesus heals the woman in our text, one person is not thrilled. The leader of the synagogue said, "There are 6 days on which work ought to be done. Come and be cured on those days, and not on the Sabbath." Now, I don't think the leader of the synagogue was being grumpy, but he did miss the point that the rest of the congregation seemed to embrace. The woman stood up. She was unburdened. Now, being a good Jew, she had walked into the synagogue on Sabbath not carrying anything visible on her back, which would have been forbidden. But it's what we carry that nobody else can see that can sometimes weigh us down more than anything. Now she was able to fully celebrate the Sabbath, and she did. The Bible says she began praising God, and it was so contagious that the entire congregation rejoiced at the wonderful things being done by Jesus. The practice of Sabbath helps ground us in God's restoration. Just think about how we were given Sabbath in the 10 Commandments. Did you know that is the longest of the 10 Commandments? God tells the people in Exodus 23, for 6 years you should plant crops in your land and gather in its produce, but in the 7th year you should leave it alone, undisturbed, so that the poor among you may eat. What they leave behind, the wild animals may eat. Nothing gets lost. You should do the same with your vineyard and your olive trees. Do your work in 6 days, but on the 7th day you should rest so that your ox and your donkey can also rest. Even the child of your female servant and the immigrant may be refreshed. Sabbath is for humankind. Sabbath is for creation, and we see this Exodus commandment to the community embodied in the healing of this woman in the synagogue. In those Sabbath years, the land was given a chance to rest, and people were given a second chance. Debts were canceled. Those who were slaves were to be set free. And after 7 cycles of Sabbath, there was a celebration on that 50th year. What'd they call that 50th year? The year of Jubilee. There you go. We've got some Sunday school scholars. Every Jubilee year, all the land that had been divided up between the tribes was given back to the original owners, even if they had mismanaged and lost their land. The whole system got an entire reset. That's why Jesus performs so many of his miracles on the Sabbath. He is announcing Jubilee in the life of this woman and in the man with the withered hand. He's saying when the reign of God comes near, it looks like restoration for the ones who have been bent over for far too long. And when Jesus calls this woman a daughter of Abraham, he was reminding her that she was more than her pain. She was not her limitations. She was beloved. And don't we, beloved of God, don't we know what it feels like to be bent over? Don't we know what it is like to feel weighed down by the erosion of our democracy? By the humanitarian crisis unfolding before our eyes in Gaza, by an age that slows us down to a pace that we're not quite comfortable with, by our worry over our family, our kids and grandkids and their future in this world, by the exhaustion of living in a time that puts far more focus on production than on restoration. My friends, like the woman in this text, we have gathered here in this house of worship today, each of us carrying something that weighs upon us. Often not visible to the naked eye, but clear to the one who holds all things and in whom all things are held. When we are weighed down, when we are bent over so far that the anxiety meds and the sleeping meds aren't helping anymore, then it becomes difficult to notice the burdens other people are carrying. My friends, this is one of the reasons why Sabbath still matters. We desperately need the restoration that Sabbath offers. It gives us room to breathe, to remember that our worth is not defined by that which weighs us down. And as we take inventory of everything that may be weighing us down in this moment, in this space today, I want to ask us all, how are our Sabbath practices going these days? As Wendell Berry wrote, the mind that comes to rest is tended in ways it cannot intend. The prophet Isaiah put it a little more bluntly. If you stop trampling Sabbath and honor it instead of doing things your way, seeking what you want and doing business as usual, then you will take delight in the Lord. I will let you ride on the heights of the earth. I will sustain you with the heritage of your ancestor Jacob. So I wonder, what is sustaining you right now? Maybe coming to worship on Sunday is one of those Sabbath practices that nourishes your soul when you see friends and community members that speak life into you, when you sing the songs of our faith. Maybe that is nourishing to your soul. I pray and hope that it is. Maybe you have a prayer ritual or a journaling time that allows you to stop and just be. Maybe you used to do something like that, but then life got crazy, and you've had a hard time finding a new rhythm. I invite you to consider starting a practice that sustains you. You see, in our story, it was in practicing Sabbath that this woman experienced healing. Part of her Sabbath was to go to the synagogue. And in doing so, she found that she was restored, and I have found that restored people can help restore others who are weighed down. When I think about what that looks like, I think about our social justice team and the incredible work they are getting ready to do with our friends at Kentucky Refugee Ministries, collecting baked goods and refreshments for the ESL classes at KRM. What good work they are doing over there right now, and how weighed down they must feel on some days, both the people coming to those classes and the people responsible for putting these classes on. We have a part to play in bringing God's restoration to those who would otherwise not experience it. And if you don't think that a brownie or a baked good of some kind can't bring about God's restoration, then you weren't here last Wednesday to have a piece of one of those cakes. Friends, each of us is carrying something. Some of it can be seen, much of it cannot. Jesus sees what you are carrying. Just as he saw this precious woman weighed down in the synagogue, Jesus sees you. He calls you forward, not to pile on to your to-do list, but to set you free. For who the Son sets free is free indeed. So friends, hear this good news today, that you are much more than what weighs you down. You are beloved, and you are invited into rest as a gift of grace. Sabbath is God's reminder that we do not have to hold everything together all by ourselves. We have permission to stop. For as Barry reminds us, the mind that comes to rest is tended in ways it cannot intend. There are people in the world, perhaps in this room, who need us to be sent out from this place not as the worn out, but as the renewed people of God, called to see the bent over ones in our world, and join in God's work of lifting them up. So, friends, may we find rest, and may we discover once more this God who is still about the work of restoration. And may we come with our lives as signs of restoration in this world for others who desperately need it. Amen.